Listen to the AZ Wildcats podcast brought to you by DraftKings, America's #1 sportsbook app. All right, now, Arizona, joined by John Schuster and Ben White. I'm merely Mike Luke. All right, Arizona beats USC. This was an interesting game because it really wasn't in doubt. This was a good win for the Wildcats. It was not an aesthetically pleasing game, but either way, it was a good win. Arizona got back on the winning track. Ąžuolas Tubelis got back to where Arizona fans need him. Courtney Ramey played well. There was a lot of positives to take away from this game, John Schuster.
For a game that was 87-81, you're right. There was a lot of disconnected components going on. Tough game to officiate, I think, and I don't know that the officials did a particularly good job. But nevertheless, it was a game, as you noted, that Arizona seemed to, control once it got up to a little bit of a lead. And it's one of those matchups that our pal Brad Allis refers to as an arm's length game. And Arizona, once it got up 8, seemed to be up the whole way by either 8 to 15. And you never, for whatever reason, felt like it was in doubt. The Cats' ball movement was excellent, and that benefited Tubelis, which is good news from Arizona's perimeter players. Ramey was excellent. Boswell had another great game. Kriisa was really good as well. And again, in addition to being able to shoot the ball effectively, their ability to find Tubelis with extra passes on an offense that moved the ball around really well was a good thing as well. Again, they scored 87 points against a USC team that is known as being effective on the defensive end. And SC never looked like it really had an answer. It didn't have an answer for Ballo and Tubelis on the inside, and Arizona was good enough from the perimeter to hold off a very impressive performance from Boogie Ellis. One other note that I thought was very fascinating, we've seen this in 2 games now where Arizona's played USC. The Cats have completely taken Peterson out of both of those games.
Yeah.
And it has been it's been very fascinating. Whatever their game plan is, or the way that they're able to execute it, Peterson just has no success against Arizona. And when that happens, it seems to be a trickle down where the U of A has a matchup benefit against an SC team that's pretty good otherwise.
Yeah, I think it's a great point there, Ben, because Peterson's interesting because you look at it, he's 6'9", and he's all of 6'9", and it doesn't look like on paper that Arizona would have a guy that would necessarily be a natural fit for him. But either way, like Schuster said, they did a good job. And quite frankly, again, this was a win that Arizona needed to have, especially coming off that. You got UCLA coming up next. If Arizona doesn't win this game, you got a lot of question marks, and the Cats capitalized right there.
Yeah, they did what they needed to do. And if somebody wasn't watching the game all that closely, the score doesn't even tell close to the story. Arizona was in control from the tip of the game all the way to the end of the game. And I think when you look at what they did against ASU and some of the struggles you saw, there were two things that solely mattered in this game. Tubelis bouncing back and defense. And the team did essentially that. Tubelis was dominant. I believe he had 18 and 8, even just in the first half alone, finished with 25 and 10. And it was easy for him. The guards made it super easy, fluid passes. Arizona did what they needed to do in a game that, quite frankly, a lot of folks, based off the odds makers, based off what we talked about, Arizona only a 2.5-point favorite going into this game, which tells you it could go either way. So not only did Arizona run away with the win, but they did it very convincingly, and they're in a great spot come Saturday against UCLA, which should be another terrific matchup.
And you can tell, too, Tommy Lloyd, and again, Tommy Lloyd's a lot smarter than us, but, smarter than me, for sure.
Just a little bit smarter than Shu.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe not smarter with the way that John Schuster can write. If you know, you know, is what as the kids would say. But he clearly wanted to get Ąžuolas Tubelis going in this game, and he got him going early. I mean, he had 8 points and 5 rebounds by about the under 12 timeout. And again, this is a guy too that we've seen has had struggles with, confidence and whatnot. This was a game that he needed, and you're going against an SC team, as John Schuster correctly put out there, that's a pretty good defensive team right there. They got length. They play pretty hard. So it's not like you were doing this against Oregon State or something like that.
It's an example of the matchup thing that I think we're going to see in the tournament as well. And there are some reasons for concern that I think are potentially interesting that maybe we can get into a little later. But it's clear that Arizona matches up very well against USC. SC matches up pretty well against everybody else in the conference. as has been indicated. And I thought Dave Pasch on the ESPN broadcast made a really interesting point about how the Lenardis and the bracketology people of the world seem to hold that first weekend that USC had against them much more dramatically than perhaps they should. And if you take that weekend out of the equation, where they didn't have a lot of their players, then they're what, a 5 or 6 loss team themselves,
right?
Who all of a sudden vaults from being, a lot of the brackets have them as an 8 or a 9, which if I were some number ones, I'm not sure I'd be terribly thrilled with that staring across at me from the bracket.
Yeah, not at all.
Is saying you take out that first weekend for SC, and you've got a team that is maybe talking about perhaps being a 5 seed. And meanwhile, Arizona has carved them up effectively in both matchups. Are there issues that may be interesting that can be taken out of this game? Perhaps. One of them, I think, is the Boogie Ellis factor. And Mike, you've talked about this a lot. Ellis had 35 points tonight. Very explosive guard from the perimeter who was extraordinarily dynamic, made a lot of shots from a lot of different spots. The problem for SC, generally speaking, beyond that, is that they were a 1 or 2 man scoring team where Arizona was a lot more rounded on the offensive end. But if there are teams out there that have a guy like Ellis who can score in bunches from the perimeter, whether the guard or the wing, and if you can have a couple other guys who turn in strong performances, then Arizona could be in for a tough night and have to work very hard to try to make some things work. Additionally, the Cats, in the end, and it might be a little exaggerated, gave up 81 points tonight. And that's a lot. Yeah, they scored 87. 87 is a very good number. And if you're consistent on the offensive end, I think that's a big deal and more noteworthy heading into the NCAA tournament. But in the last 2 games, the Cats, who had a string a few weeks ago where they were holding teams into the 50s, gave up, 89 to ASU and 81 to SC?
Right.
Those are numbers that you could start looking at and perhaps being a little bit concerned about, especially against once you get into the tournament, obviously. So there are some areas. And the third area that I think I'd be interested in, and it may be a reason for discussion, and Mike will probably get to this eventually, is why didn't SC press earlier? Because when they pressed with about 2.5 minutes to go, as opposed to maybe pressing with, say, 6 minutes to go, they managed to cut into the lead a little bit.
Let's get to that. I think Sean makes a great point here, and he's asking the great John Schuster about this. Will this Arizona team figure ever out how to cleanly break a full court press? And I think it's a great question if you go against a team, God forbid, like a Houston or something that basically does that throughout the game.
Well, what you're getting, we've talked about this to some degree before. I think there are going to be teams that clearly have the ability for some time to press Arizona a little bit. The question is, how much are they going to do it? And is it going to be 6 minutes strategically here and there, or are they going to do it in a desperation standpoint? The one area that frustrates me, and the way that I think I would approach this, is using Tubelis as a safety valve instead of sticking Tubelis under the offensive basket. Now, the thought process is understandable. You got backcourt players who are supposed to be able to move the ball around, and then you get it into a half-court set and try to make things work, and teams have to watch Tubelis under the basket, so theoretically you've got to take one of your players out of the pressing situation on the defensive end. But to me, when you're in trouble, and Arizona, in addition to having ball handling issues, and again, Mike, you've touched on this a little bit, not one singular guy who necessarily is good at breaking the press himself. They don't have a lot of height in the backcourt either. Right. And that, I think, is really the larger problem than whether they can handle the ball particularly well. So that combination allows teams with athleticism defensively to have some effectiveness in a 3-quarter or full court press situation. This is where I think Tubelis could help. Tubelis is 6'11", a pretty good ball handler, can hold it above his head and kind of direct traffic a little bit to see if there's something that can get open. And Arizona has decided instead to move Tubelis away from the play, hoping that it will force the opposition to have to be aware of him under the basket. And that's the one area that I think, with the makeup that Arizona has, it's the approach that I'd utilize. I'd try to have Tubelis much more available as a safety valve. Furthermore, he's also a decent free throw shooter. So one of the things you're trying to avoid here as well, and it's the reason Ballo isn't on the floor in these situations. Ballo's a 57% free throw shooter. Tubelis is a little bit better than that. But he's the guy who I think is key in some of these situations, and I wish Arizona would use him a little bit more.
Yeah, I think when you look at the guards, and while this definitely wasn't, the telling time when it comes to the score at the end of the game, only winning by 6, but you got to remember too, Arizona was up by double digits with less than 3 minutes left. I just thought that the execution at the end was poor. I think in an NCAA tournament environment and a Pac-12 tournament environment, you would hope that there's a little bit more tenacity and more aggressiveness on the defensive side. And they did a pretty good job in spurts. And I think it was evident from the beginning that, you talked about Peterson at the beginning, and we talked a little bit about, obviously, Ellis and what he did having 35 points. But I think Lloyd's game plan and the blueprint for this one really was, if we can stop everybody else but Ellis, we're going to be in a pretty good spot. And that's what Arizona did for the most part outside of the last 2 or 3 minutes in that game. I thought there was a play, I think, and we'll get to it on Mike's boy Larson, kind of just standing around there on a putback and let Ellis make an easy shot that made it a 7-point game. But it's one of those situational things, right? Because Arizona controlled the game. They did what they needed to do through most of the second and first half, but you got a little bit lazy and reluctant at the end there. So both can be said, but time will tell, and we'll see. Because again, this is one of those matchups where USC is going to be able to score. They're really strong offensively. They've got guys that certainly you can't overlook, and they've always had that under Enfield, whether it's Ellis or Boatwright or a number of different guys they've had come through that program.
I like that. Good reference in there, Ben. I like that.
And obviously, Enfield is somebody who I feel like is underlooked just because of the nature of USC basketball and the fact that it's never going to be really a dominant or too relevant program, but he's done a heck of a job. He brings in the recruits year in and year out. So Arizona can't overlook them. And then you look at what they have against UCLA, and I think the test will be is, do you slow down and are you able to play that bully ball of beating teams up physically and scoring in the 50s and 60s? Because that's probably what type of game it will be. So I think really the test comes on Saturday. Arizona did some great things. And bottom line, right, when you shoot 54% from the field, it's going to be pretty hard to not lose to a team right there. So all in all, I would have liked to see them go at Ellis a little bit more aggressively. I'm not quite sure why he was still in the game at the end, given all the foul trouble and issues they had. But it just seemed like the game plan was to kind of step back, attack everybody else, and let Ellis do his thing. And if that was the game plan, ultimately it was executed well.
Ben, I think you hit the nail on the head. By the way, back the A and back Del Taco. Very well put right there. Del Taco, one of the 5 healthiest Mexican restaurants in the United States, if you want to count it as a Mexican restaurant.
One of the 5 healthiest cheeseburgers when it comes to fast food. Get it right, my friend.
John Schuster, have you tried the cheeseburger from Del Taco?
It's the only thing I have if I go to Del Taco.
All right, just wanted to make sure on that. All right, now let me tell you 2 things. First of all, I want to give it a little bit of a tip of the cap because we're not going to really talk about it much more. Andy Enfield, I think, has done a spectacular job at USC. My entire life, USC has basically been – they'll have a couple nice years, and then you don't hear about them for 5 or 6 years. Under Andy Enfield, they basically are always a tournament team. They always win 25 games. So again, I'll give them credit on that. By the way, there's Del Taco slander on the side right here that will be addressed here in a second. But first, the DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX. Here's the deal. You can throw down $5, and you can get up to $200 in free plays betting on people that look like Jacob Franklin out there. Now, again, they're as tall as Jacob Franklin. They're probably a little bit more athletic. Right now, you might want to bet on the Suns. Check on the Suns. Suns are going to be very, very good.
Didn't they get a pretty good player recently?
The rumor is that there's a good player there. I watched them the other night too, and I think that they're going to cakewalk out of the West. Could be wrong on that, but again, check it out. DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX. 21 and up, Arizona only. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP, and check out the show notes and link in the description. Also, the DraftKings Pick of the Week. You guys are going to like this here because this is going to lead into our next segment before I go right back at the Del Taco deniers right here. I'm picking Arizona to beat UCLA Saturday. That's my DraftKings Pick of the Week. What do you guys say? Am I stupid? What do you say there, John Schuster?
Well, those are two questions. I won't answer the second one. The whether Arizona can beat UCLA. Of course it can. And in that regard, I remember one of our conversations last week where I made some reference, and one of those things where you read a comment below and then you say the first thing that kind of pops into your head, and then you think about it a little bit later and reflect to some degree. And one of the possibilities I suggested out there was that, if UCLA clinches the conference after the ASU loss, then, how interested are they really going to be in that matchup, and so on and so forth. And then the more I thought about it, is of course they're going to be interested in that matchup. They can't stand Arizona, and they're playing possibly for a number 1 seed. So even though they've got the Pac-X tournament top seed ultimately locked in, obviously they're going to come in full bore to try to get back at Arizona. So I think that's going to can Arizona win that game? Absolutely, Arizona can win that game. They are one of the few teams, I think, that gives UCLA real matchup problems. I think it's kind of one of the interesting things as far as the tournament is concerned. I think UCLA has a better chance to make a deeper tournament run than Arizona because UCLA plays defense and matches up reasonably well against most of the teams in the country. Arizona, however, is one of those teams that UCLA really could struggle with. So could Arizona get the W in Poly Saturday? Yeah, that absolutely could happen.
Ben White, do you want to go out on a limb with me and say that you're going to pick Arizona for your DraftKings pick of the week?
I will go out on a huge limb, and I will pick Arizona in my DraftKings pick of the week, mostly because I will be at Poly at the game covering it for us. So I'd like to see a good game in person.
PHNX Wildcats on assignment in Poly Pavilion. That's how big we are right here.
You only get that at PHNX, only at PHNX.
All right. Now, real quick, I need to get back to Del Taco here just for a second. I need to be very clear about this. What I'm vouching for at Del Taco is the cheeseburgers. If you guys have not tried the cheeseburgers, don't at me, as the kids say. Go try the cheeseburgers. They're fantastic cheeseburgers. Jacob Franklin grew to be 6'8" by eating Del Taco cheeseburgers loaded with protein. Check it out. Again, Del Taco. You might even see the good friend Bruce Pascoe up there at some point.
And Mike Luke grew to be 5'9" eating Del Taco cheeseburgers.
Did. All 5'9" of Mike Luke and all 6'8" of Jacob Franklin, all because of the Del Taco cheeseburger. All right. Now, let's talk about Western Bacon Cheese. Oh, well, Western Bacon cheeseburgers from Carl's Jr. are the gold standard. Yes. My good friend Kevin Woodman and I used to spend hours talking about Western Bacon cheeseburgers on a radio station back in the day. All right. Now, Cy Guy, you're our guy, but we will take your apology right here. If you haven't tried it, don't stick your finger in my eye until you tried it. If you don't like it, then come back and stick your finger in my eye. All right.
Such violence.
Yeah, I know. I get very upset about the Del Taco cheeseburgers. All right, UCLA. Enough of the Del Taco cheeseburgers. We expect you, though, on Sunday or Saturday to come back with progress reports. All of you right there. And we will, let's see, the Del Taco, let's see. All right, one more. The Del Taco, an actual taco, is the best fast food taco in the game. No contest, jam-packed with beef and cheese. I agree. By the way, Mike, we need a PHNX Del Taco podcast. I would love that. Max Simpson, you're not listening, but that would be a great thing to set up right there. Okay, UCLA, Arizona here. Arizona right now, if you look at it, they're projected now as a 2 seed. I firmly believe that if Arizona wins out, they will get a 1 seed. Here's my case. You beat UCLA, and I get John Schuster's point about how it I get John Schuster's point about how it's already, the conference is wrapped up. I get that. But if you beat UCLA a second time and then you rematch with them in the Pac-12 tournament, with all the wins you have, considering right now you're considered a 2 seed, I think Arizona could very well be a number 1 seed if they win out. What do you guys say?
Yeah, I think you can. I think you can make that argument. The one coincidental stumbling block, I think, is UCLA, because they won the conference, and they won the conference with more than a week to play. And that may be the obstacle, the hurdle that Arizona ultimately faces, assuming that the scenario works the way that you laid out. But I can certainly see it. And I don't think it's a bad argument either. In fact, one of the things, I was looking at some numbers a little earlier this week, and one of the numbers that jumped out at me was how good Arizona is at the top and how fascinated that they were being penalized for their performance against teams that were in, quad 3?
Right.
Not quad 1 or quad 2. Do you know how many teams in the NCAA tournament have 2 losses or less against quad 1 opponents that have played them at least 5 times?
That seems like a rhetorical question. That seems like a rhetorical question.
I'll give you the answer. It's 2. The only other team that Arizona is 6-2. The only other team that has 2 or 1 losses against quad 1 competition with at least 5 games played against quad 1 is Houston, and they're 4-1. So they've played half the amount of games that Arizona has in those matchups. And, obviously has a very good record. Everybody's got Houston. I don't argue that Houston's the number 1 seed. Don't have a problem with that at all.
They're good.
But Arizona dropped to a 3 on a lot of these projections. And when you're in the NCAA tournament, what's more important as far as your resume is concerned? Having lost to a couple bad teams or beaten a number of good teams? Because theoretically, once you get to the tournament, you're playing the better teams, right? So if you've done well playing better teams, then shouldn't that carry a little bit extra weight?
Well, but you also
carries a little bit extra weight. Then Arizona shouldn't Arizona benefit as a result of that?
But I think you're forgetting something, though. How can you fit all 12 Big Ten teams into the NCAA tournament if you're going by that theory?
Well, and it's a great point. I mean, I think I saw something with Rutgers today, who's, I think 1 game over 500 in their conference and has an overall record of something like 15-12. But clearly, they're somehow a 4 seed. Where Arizona State is, out of the tournament. Yes. Like, what are we doing?
Lunardi had something. I was watching him yesterday that had something that really made me laugh. He was talking about Penn State. Again, not Joe Paterno Penn State from the 1980s. Penn State now, who I don't even know the coaches. And he says, I think I can speak for a lot of colleges right here that if you get into the NCAA tournament, Penn State's one of the last teams that you want to play. No, that's crap. I want to play Penn State. I want a bracket where you get Penn State, Northwestern, Rutgers, Maryland, and all this other crap right here. It's insane. To me, is one of the craziest things that I've seen in college athletics in quite a while.
Also, Arizona has played, and you guys know it off the top of my head probably quicker than I do, a non-conference schedule that includes a good Creighton team, a good Indiana team. No, by the way, an Indiana team from the Big Ten, Tennessee team. Okay. On one of the mock brackets heading into this game today, Tennessee was a number 2 seed and Arizona was a 3.
I did see that.
Right.
Like, wait, and none of the numbers aligned with that.
Yeah.
But there's this incestuous issue with the conference algorithm. And if the computers go in somehow to the conference and believe that conference is good, when a team plays in conference games, they automatically get the benefit of playing teams that are also considered high, so they get all these quad 1 and quad 2 matchups. Kansas is something like 15-5 in quad 1 games. So somehow the Jayhawks have played 20 of these games. I love Kansas. Kansas deserves to be a number 1 seed. Don't have a problem with it. They're the best team in the best conference. I get it, no problem. But you still have this situation where, the Pac-X gets hurt because there's this interpretation that the conference as a whole isn't very good, even though you guys have noted they've won more games against non-conference competition, legitimate non-conference competition, than any other conference. What more are you supposed to do? Yet the Pac-X somehow can't benefit itself based on the limited number of games out there. But every night in the Big Ten, somebody plays somebody amazing, and as a result of that, their overall strength of schedule improves. Arizona's strength of schedule is 69. Wait, how? Honestly, how? Against Tennessee, Indiana, Creighton, and San Diego State, and I'm probably missing a couple, and Pac-X competition. How is Arizona's strength of schedule 69? That's almost impossible. But the algorithm and the computer numbers have it that way, and it hurts the Pac-X in terms of where their seeding positions ultimately are and the number of teams that probably deserve to be in the tournament.
Yeah, it's not the algorithm. It's the people, man. It's the people. I was listening to Lenardi against it was during the ASU UCLA game prior, and they asked him about the strength of the Pac-12, and I think the prior question, we always talk about the Big Ten, and he's talking about Penn State, talking about Purdue, talking about all these great teams, and then they ask him, so what do you think about the Pac-12 this year? And he goes, pretty subpar per usual, some snarky answer like that. And I think I just don't get it, because like Shu said, on paper they have the most reputable wins in the country when you look at what they've done from a sample size standpoint, having those 8 games and the records that they have. I don't know if folks just want to spin it as Arizona got those wins at the right time. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's kind of like it's kind of like making excuses like a little kid. You run out of things to complain about and you run out of people to blame, right? So it's just one of those situations where unless Arizona just gets into the tournament, and God, I hope this happens, like you guys said, 4 or 5 Big Ten teams, something nuts like that in the tournament, you bounce and beat Big Ten team after Big Ten team in the tournament, man, that would be fantastic. Even if Arizona only makes it to like the Sweet 16 or something like that, just stepping over those teams would really, I think, be really the only way to solidify them. I just don't know how you get rid of this bias. I mean, I've been through it a million times. We look at what they've done from a black and white standpoint. We look at it on paper. It just doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't.
It doesn't make any sense. And let's say you're like me and you're frustrated. You're thinking to yourself, man, what can I do to alleviate some of this? OGs. Now you might say to yourself, Mike, where can I get OGs? Thanks for asking. You can go to your local dispensary. You can get indicas, sativas, all of the stuff when you're getting frustrated by the Big Ten bracket. You can go there and you can get it indicas, sativas, all good flavors. Check out the show notes and the link in the description. And you know what? If you got some OGs, you might say to yourself, man, I'm a little hungry right now. Mountain Mike's Pizza. Again, I'm not Mountain Mike. I always have to put this disclaimer out there, even though nobody has ever associated me with being Mountain Mike. Mountain Mike is great pizza. John Schuster has been there. Ben White informed us that it is in California as well. The great William Brad Alice has come on here with a Mountain Mike's cup. Jacob Franklin, I'm sure, has been to Mountain Mike's Pizza. And let's see, it looks like he's saying yes. Check it out, Oracle and Wetmore. Great food, great drink, great place to check it out right there, Mountain Mike's Pizza. Okay, now, I want to get back to Arizona here for a second here. Courtney Ramey. I've felt I almost went like this, and I don't know why. Courtney Ramey, I feel, is kind of an X factor here for Arizona, because when
that must have been why.
What's that?
That must have been why.
Yeah,
he's an X factor.
Yeah, that is why. Because we've talked about this a little bit. He is the one guy that he is the one guy on this team that I think from a ball handling perspective, and again, he shoots a lot of threes. We talked about that. I think he's now first in the conference or tied with Kriisa. But when I watch him, he can handle the ball. He can get to the hoop. He can pull up from mid-range. I don't know exactly what I expect from him, but I also think he's a player, though, that's going to be able to – it wouldn't surprise me if there's a time coming up here where he, from the perimeter position, puts Arizona on his back, because I think he's got that kind of ability, and I think that's a unique position. What do you say there, Ben White and John Schuster?
Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I think he's really interesting, because when you look at his background and you look at where he came from, I mean, this guy is a fifth-year player. A lot of people forget that. How many times did we talk about prior to him coming here? Well, he's a guy who played at Texas, averaged 8 and 10. And, you listen to the Doug Gottliebs of the world, you listen to everybody else. And, when you look at historically what transfers have done at that point in their career, 4 years in, they kind of are what they kind of are. And that hasn't been the case with him. Lloyd is somebody who has shown that they can bring somebody in at any point in time. You look at what Lloyd has done with guys who are under Miller. You look at what Lloyd's doing with guys that he brings in himself. But there's just that developmental factor that is there, and it catches on quickly. And Ramey's a guy who, like you said, can do so much more than shoot the ball. Well, he's a great three-point shooter. He's a great jump shooter. He's also a guy who knows how to pass and get crafty and be aggressive and force turnovers. I mean, he had a couple good plays tonight. I think he had a steal on Ellis and a couple of other things. But, my thing on him is it's just the ceiling is way up here. And we thought it was going to be way down here. We thought he was going to just be a guy who we plug in. Maybe he's kind of a 3-and-D guy, a guy who's kind of a spot-up shooter, comes in and gets Arizona points when their offense stagnates. But he's gone from being that guy to being somebody who can run Arizona's offense when need be and be in command, be aggressive, make these shots, get the ball inside to Tubelis. He's the full package, man. He's definitely probably the biggest surprise, I think, to me up until this point when you look at the roster and the guys on this team.
His proverbial upside, and Schuster, I want to get your take here in a second, but I got a few more reads here. The great Jacob Franklin is very tired right now, so I need to do some things here.
All right, I want Schuster to talk fast.
Now you might say to yourself, Mike, any place that I can watch the game Saturday?
Mike, any place I can watch the game Saturday, other than with Ben at Poly Pavilion?
Well, we don't all get to hang out with Ben White at Poly Pavilion, but we will all be on assignment in Las Vegas, though, this coming week, though. All right, now, but here's where you watch it, though. Tap and Bottle. The Tap and Bottle watch parties are back with a vengeance. 8 o'clock this Saturday. I will be down there rooting on the Cats, and would love to see all of you down there. Guess what I'm going to be drinking down there? I might be down in a 4 Peaks or 2 right there, Now, it's pretty much down to the 2 Peaks right now for the Wildcats, but that doesn't mean that the 4 Peaks are not still contributing in all their manners behind the scenes. Now, when you get 4 Peaks, the brew, you don't have to worry about that because you're consuming in front of the scene right there. It's an odd connection I just made there, but you know what? It's late. I'll go with it. Check out the show notes and the link in the description and Tap and Bottle watch parties. Or excuse me, 4 both of them. You know what?
And the Tap and Bottle watch party.
4 Peaks.
So that I can get this straight, 4 Peaks, you can have 4 Peaks at the Tap and Bottle watch party, which is this Saturday as Arizona takes on UCLA in Poly, where Ben White will be.
And get this, you can go to Mountain Mike's Pizza, which isn't too far from Westwood, and grab a slice and take that into Poly Pavilion. We're taking this show on the road, baby.
All right, now let me get one more in here, then we'll get back to basketball here for a second. Run your pool. I've never read this before, so I'm going to read this off the script. Okay. March Madness is obviously a tradition, and fans can play against and win cash and PHNX locker gear. March Madness is coming, and we've teamed up with Run Your Pool to give you a chance to compete in a bracket challenge. Okay, here's what you do. Prices for competing against us. Show that you know ball. First place gets $300 and a $75 PHNX locker gift card. Second place, $150 cash, and third place, $50. It's free to play. The important dates: Selection Sunday, 5 p.m., and March 14th to 15th. First 4 play-in. March 16th, 10:15. First game tips off. Deadline to fill out the bracket. So here's the deal. Almost done with this. Head over to https:/play.runyourpool.com PHNX, and don't forget your picks when the bracket's live. Run Your Pool is home of the competition, bringing sports fans and their friends together to connect and compete. Run Your Pool has over 50 game types for every sport that you could think of. It's a one-stop shop for everything gaming with over 2 million players. There's no better place to run run this, family and office. And on top of that, you can probably get an autograph from the great Jacob Franklin as well right there. Okay. And thank you, by the way. I do believe Kylan Boswell should be the point guard. I like a lot what I saw right here. All right, guys. Again, let's see here. Tap and Bottle delivers. Very good point right there. Okay.
Very cool.
Guys, let's put a bow on this right now so Jacob Franklin can get to sleep. What did you guys think of this game? Overall, I'm very pleased. Arizona got a good win against a solid team. Ąžuolas Tubelis came back to life.
Yeah, the Tubelis performance especially is something. He looked a little bit more, I don't know if engaged is the right word per se, but maybe whatever the involvement was, the thing that seemed to have him off his game for the last couple weeks, he looked much more like the Tubelis that we've seen throughout the course of the year. So I thought that was a good thing to see. And Arizona's obviously going to need that kind of performance as they progress through March.
Yeah, I thought Tubelis was a guy who, when you look at the struggles he's had the last couple of weeks, I think he's a guy who, if he doesn't get going early, it kind of wears on him and he loses his confidence. And you see some of those mental mistakes that you saw the last couple of weeks. And he was game plan A, game plan B, and game plan C for the Wildcats tonight. Get the ball inside 25-10. Looked like a fluid, easy 25-10 per usual when he's on his game. And I think you look at, too, what the guards did, and it really kind of ties together and encompasses what these guys have been able to string together and how much better they've gotten throughout Pac-12 play. I thought Ramey's best game of the season, I think in conference, was tonight with the way he was getting things going offensively, not only from a shooting perspective, but he was just able to get guys involved. And he was just really aggressive on the offensive and defensive end. I think he's a big reason why Arizona was up in double digits for most of this game. So you look at what Tubelis did. If he's giving you that 25-10, that 20-10, whatever it may be, double figures, double across the board, and the guards are shooting well, and Arizona's doing just enough on the defensive end, I would have liked them to tighten up things towards the end. I don't think it should have been a 6-point game. I think it should have been much larger than that. But again, when you factor in all those things, and when a team shoots 54% from the field against a really athletic USC team that has guys on the guards and has guys up front, it's going to be hard to lose a basketball game. And I don't think you could have been asked for more based on what Arizona did against USC, a very, very dominant performance. And it is the teaser to what we have going on Saturday. Saturday will be a heck of a game.
All right, everybody out there, you are all fantastic. Appreciate all your comments. You're the ones that bring the show to life. And Del Taco is not a sponsor. We're just talking about Del Taco cheeseburgers with passion on here. Well, who am I kidding? It's just me that's saying that. But again, you guys are all the best. John Schuster, Ben White, Jacob Franklin behind the scenes. We will be back with you on Saturday. You have been listening to the AZ Wildcats postgame on the AZ Wildcats podcast.